The next day, the 4th of March, dawned hot and clear. After we made breakfast, we did not tear down our fire, as would have normally been the case. Instead, we began to brew the carefully shredded Banisteriopsis caupi wood in several gallons of spring water. The fire made from the gnarled and now sun-baked roots burned furiously. The pot responded with an even rolling boil that is the correct condition for making the drug. All afternoon long we cooked and said little. Dave and Vanessa were to join us for a light meal early in the evening, and then they had agreed to withdraw from the group and allow the Yahé taking and the experimental test of hypercarbylation to go on without them. I am sure that Dennis' mind, far more than my own, was preoccupied with the details of the test. During the days preceding, he had been often irritable, and this I took to be a part of the spectrum of effects accompanying whatever odd sort of mental unfoldment he was going through. While he was thus occupied with interior issues and vistas, I was the hawk-eyed guardian of the shamanic fires and procedures. There recently had been much discussion of fire and the role it must have played in forming the mental world of human beings. Once, as we sat staring into the campfire, Dennis had remarked to me that people have been looking into fires like this for thousands and thousands of years. The squeal of these coals is the release of ionized plasma, and into the flickering walls of waves of free electrons thus created, one can see into the past and the future. The fire is the place where the ideas come from. I was silent. I felt our ancestors then, seemingly present on the other side of the interface represented by the flame. What is happening to us? I asked it myself again, but said nothing, silence seeming more eloquent. Dennis wrote furiously part of the day as follows. March 4th. It is now possible to reconstruct the physical-chemical idea that has evolved in the process of understanding this phenomenon, i.e. the fourth-dimensional rotation of matter. I understand from examining the linguistic model we have constructed that the waveform ESR interference that will accompany the work operates in a somewhat different manner than I had thought. It can be explained thus. The psilocybin that occurs in the mushroom acts as an antenna for picking up and amplifying the harmonic ESR tones of all tryptophan-derived compounds of all living organisms within its range. Since the psilocybin undergoing metabolism is superconductive, this means that its range of reception is theoretically infinite, and the antenna does, to some degree, pick up a signal whose ultimate origin is the totality of living creatures. But since the psilocybin metabolism is carried on within the brain or mushroom at a very low voltage level, the antenna behaves as though its range was limited, even though it is superconductive. It seems clear, therefore, that the signal, which on the mushroom and in this ecologically dense area can be discerned so clearly, originates in the ESR resonation of the Yahé plant, though perhaps all of the biosphere is picked up and broadcast amplified via the Yahé superconductive transducer. This understanding will clarify precisely what will occur at the moment of fourth-dimensional warp. Ingesting the Yahé harmine will speed up the process of metabolism enough to amplify its ESR tone to an audible level. This ESR tone will harmonically cancel out the ESR tone of the psilocybin within the mushroom, causing it to lose its electric field and snap into a superconducting configuration. The Yahé ESR signal will have keyed the mushroom psilocybin into a superconducting antenna. It is then ready to have the psilocybin harmine DNA compound being metabolized within the body, condensed onto its charged template. A microsecond after the mushroom psilocybin has been superconductively charged, its amplified ESR wave will then cancel out the ESR signals of the tryptamines and harmine metabolizing in the body, as well as the genetic material. This will cause these compounds to drop into a superconductive configuration and bond together at the exact same time that they bond to the waiting mushroom template. This transfer of superconductive compounds charged within the body to a superconductive template prepared within the mushroom will not occur in three-dimensional space. No actual physical transfer will be visible, as the organically processed superconductive material will bond itself to the mushroom template through a higher spatial dimension. The result will be the work of works, that wonder which cannot be told, 4 dimensions captured and delineated in 3. The stone will be all things, but the elements which are bound together in hyperspace to form it are among the most common natural products, and the function and place of each in the stone can be understood. The stone is a solid-state hyperdimensional circuit that is quadripartite in structure. First, psilocybin, charged in the mushroom to act as a template on which the rest of the circuit is condensed. In the final stone, the psilocybin acts as a superconducting antenna to pick up on information diffused through space and time. Second, the superconductively charged harmine complex within the stone will act as its transmitter and energy source. It is interesting to note that the same energy that sustains the antenna circuits in superconductivity will sustain the whole of the device. The third component of the stone is the DNA bonded to and resonating through the harmine. It will constitute the hyperdimensional holographic memory of the device and will contain and explicate the genetic history of all species. It will be the collective memory of the device, and all times and places and conceivable forms will be accessible within its matrix. The fourth part of the circuit will be the RNA, which will also be superconductively charged. Through its function of self-replication turned through hyperspace, the RNA will be able to project a waveform, three-dimensional holographic image, and thus it will give form instantly to any idea. It will perform the same function it has always had, the process of replication through time, but henceforth replication will be subject in part to the whim of consciousness. Why I and my companions have been selected to understand and trigger the Gestalt wave of understanding that will be the unleashing of the hyperspatial zeitgeist is becoming more clear to me each moment, though I know I won't understand our mission fully until the work is complete. We will be instructed in the use of the stone by some infinitely wise, infinitely adept fellow member of the hyperspatial community. Of that I feel sure. It will be the taking of the keys to galactarian citizenship. I speculate that we will be the first 5 human beings to be instructed in its use. Our mission will be to selectively disseminate it to the rest of humanity, but slowly and in such a way as to ease the culture shock. It is also somehow appropriate that at least some segment of the species have an intimation of the implications and possibilities of this, the last cultural artifact. And so now, against all probabilities and chance and circumstance, my companions and I have been given the peculiar privilege of knowing history will end. It would be a strange position to find oneself in if being in that position did not bring with it a full understanding of what forces it was that brought one there. Fortunately, as the phenomenon is an acceleration of understanding, one gains clearer insight into the forces that have bent space and time and thought and culture back upon themselves to focus them at this point. Now I can look back upon my life as spread before the scanner of memory and understand all those moments that foreshadowed this one. It is easy to look beyond the personal history to the events of history and discern therein the prefiguration of this last moment. As a phenomenon, it has always existed, and it will continue, for it is the moving edge of phenomenal understanding that was generated in the era before physics and has gathered momentum, a constant acceleration ever since. What we are moving toward in 3 dimensions is the passing of this wave of understanding into a higher dimension, the realm of the atemporal. As it happens, it will make this transition through one of us, but there will be no change in this cosmic order, or even a blip on the cosmic circuits, for the phenomenon has gathered constant momentum from the beginning, and it will flow through and beyond all dimensions with the same smoothness it entered, until finally it has moved through all being in all dimensions. Its joy will then be complete when in a vast amount of time it has constellated full understanding throughout creation. If we trigger the eschatology, we will appear to act in the role of the Antichrist. But the real Antichrist is history's distorted reflection of the Christ at the end of time, the cosmic Adam Anthropos. The eschatological Christ is Antichrist only from a historical perspective. It is interesting that among the Mazatecans the idea of Christ is linked to the mushroom. Is this syncretism or prophecy? That evening's collective meal with Dave and Vanessa at our camp with the Yahe infusion cooling in the background was less than successful, for by now positions relative to the phenomenon had polarized into irreconcilability. They arrived near the close of day and joined us in the hut for a smoke. Discussion led to an update and rehash of the experiment proposed for the evening. Dennis spoke. We will obtain a metabolizing living mushroom, dig up the shit around it, and physically move the whole thing to the hut. We want to do the bonding in the mushroom because we don't know what it would be like if it were done in our own bodies. It's wide open. With your voice, your mind, and a mushroom, these things can be done. That is all one needs. Accelerators, all of that? No. With the energy that is hundreds of times less than the energy in an ordinary flashlight battery, one can probably rend space-time apart. The air was heavy with charged ions. Dave was full of doubt. As he talked, there was the grumble of distant thunder far off over the jungle. Dave's objections to what we were doing were emotional and fearful, hardly what we expected from a colleague. We tried to be reassuring, but he became agitated and rushed out of the hut, perhaps, we thought, intending to walk back to the river house. Instead, we heard an exclamation of fear and a kind of moan, a yell for us. We all clambered out of the hut to find Dave white-faced and staring at the sky, pointing. The light of a first-quarter moon revealed the tattered sky, and directly above the path returning to the river was an enormous black thunderhead rearing its twisting and writhing form up through thousands of feet of moisture and electricity-saturated air. It looked like an enormous whirlwind with broad strokes of lightning flickering out of its lower portions, touching the tops of the jungle canopy with a roar that was as deafening as field artillery when it broke over us. Over the roar of the wind that was now whipping the jungle all around us into a wild frenzy, I heard Dennis yell, "It's a reflection of the approaching breakthrough. It says to me there is now no doubt we'll succeed." From Dave, a moan as he sank unbelieving to the sandy soil as the first huge drops began to fall. I thought of King Lear. In the wake of an ear-splitting blast, we all fell back to the hut. In a few minutes, the giant storm moved on, leaving only a chaotic and churning sunset. The sudden electrical storm and its impact on us was taken as an omen by all points of view. We assumed it was associated with a feedback of effects from the experiment, whose performance was now only a few hours ahead of us. Dave and Vanessa thought it a light dose of the wrath of God for having such Promethean aspirations. In returning to the hut to escape the onset of the storm, Vanessa had sprained her ankle by slipping from the notched log that served as the stepladder into the hut. Is this the healing of my split T that my astrologer foretold for this time? Scorpio Vanessa asked of no one in particular. Dennis ate nothing. Ev and I shared a light meal with our guests. They wished us good night and good luck, and hobbled away toward the river. The three of us were then left alone, and there remained nothing for it but to make the test that Dennis had devised, and whose anticipation had caused so much strain on our expedition. The yahe had been brewed. Through having seen ayahuasca brewed professionally by shamans in Peru since, I am sure that our brew was too weak to have had any major role in what happened. It was the mushroom that was the causal agent, if a causal agent could in fact be isolated. And mushrooms we had, both picked ones as well as specimens moved into the hut in situ in their manure bases. Living, metabolizing psilocybin and psilocin should be present, we thought. We had hung the chrysalis butterfly near the mushroom, so that animal tissue undergoing metamorphosis should also be represented in the target area tableau. What was science and what ritual? We did not know and could not tell. They had become fused.